The idea of imposing term limits for Congress or mandatory restriction on how long members of the House and Senate can serve in office has been debated by the public for centuries. Currently, the members of Congress have no limitation over the number of years they can serve. The members of the Senate are allowed to serve for infinite number of terms, each having 6 years. In the U.S. House of Representatives, members have 2 years, and there is no limit as to how many terms an individual may seek in re-election. This means they can seek re-election every time, and if they win, they continue being the representatives. According to ThoughtCo, the longest member of the Senate served for 51 years, while the longest member of the House stayed in position for 53 years. This does not allow for you and I to be represented as accurately as possible. By doing research, I learned why it is important for us to have term limits as a country. I believe term limits are important in order to move our country forward in a positive direction. Today I'm going to share with you the negative impact of no term limits and why it is important for the United States to set congressional and Supreme Court term limits. I will also share with you how to make your voice heard in order to encourage term limits. I will begin by explaining different points as to why congressional term limits would make our country more successful, while also pointing to the effect of no term limits. I will also provide ways in which you can advocate. By the conclusion, I hope you have decided term limits are in the best interest of our nation and will move forward with advocacy. Implementing term limits will allow for new ideas. When the same people keep getting elected to Congress time and time again, the same debates happen over and over again. Low turnover rates in Congress create a foundation of stale ideas. New perspectives can provide different types of influence and can inspire changes in a way that may benefit the whole society. Senators and representatives would be able to bring more to each discussion because they are less likely to be isolated from their districts because of responsibilities in Washington, D.C. The Chicago Tribune alleges that term limits would also encourage voting. Many people vote in every election, but a majority of people in a district not voting is becoming an all too common occurrence. If people know that their senator or representative is likely to be reelected, they feel like there isn't a need to get involved in their political process. By establishing term limits, more people could come out to vote because there would be more opportunities for change. Voters would know that even if their preferred candidate loses, term limits set a specific deadline that cannot be changed. Next, it would stop political power moves. Many of the political machines in the United States are designed to keep people in office. Ventana shows that before his first 100 days in office were even completed, Donald Trump had a 2020 re-election pact in place and was raising money for his next campaign. Incumbents can wield a lot of power to stay in office, and term limits would help to cut this leverage away. The focus can be placed on governing instead of being re-elected. Further, it would limit the influence lobbyists have on long-serving congressmen and women. Special interests lobby many of their efforts toward keeping specific people in power once they've been elected to Congress. They do this because those people can represent their specific interest. The only problem is that special interests are often contrary to what the people really want. By establishing term limits in Congress, more people and new candidates will be able to present their ideas that could help balance out the scales and influence each election. Also, term limits would allow for newly elected officials to have some influence according to the U.S. term limits. The system of seniority in Congress does have some benefits for leadership, but it also comes with a large disadvantage. Newly elected officials rarely receive powerful posts on committees or can influence procedures. That responsibility goes to those who have more seniority and more power. As a result, new senators and representatives may spend more of their time trying to get a foot in the door than they actually spend helping craft legislation. Term limits would make it possible for more elected officials to influence the direction of our country. The Washington Times believes and argues that term limits will allow for limiting potential corruption. When politicians have a specific time in office, there is less of a risk of corruption into the conversation. Newly elected officials will usually have less knowledge about how to influence Congress for their own personal gain. New members are usually more skeptical of special interest lobbying efforts as well. Having more new faces come through because of term limits would make it more difficult to unduly influence future laws. The United States is a diverse nation with 6 living generations. Term limits allow for those to be more accurately represented. Society is constantly evolving and new ideas and thought patterns are introduced every day. It is important to have these new ideas represented equally. We need fresh faces and fresh ideas in Congress. It is important to express opinions on term limits. Although it will not be brought to a vote for everyday citizens, there are ways that you can make your voice heard. There are many petitions advocating for term limits, such as on U.S. term limits. The more signatures they have, the more it will be noticed by DC officials. The more members of Congress stay in office, the more power they amass and thus the vulnerability to corruption. Essentially, imposing term limits on members of Congress would be the plus in the fight against corruption and impunity in the country. Most of the members who have served for a long time in Congress tend not to listen to their constituents in making decisions for Congress. Sharing articles and posting on social media advocating for term limits is powerful because it draws in media. Finally, contacting your senator and representative and speaking with them about your opinion can help further the process. This is evidenced by the many times that members in Congress go against public will, even in cases where it is all too clear on what the general public wants. The members of Congress who have served so long usually do not consult their constituents in the process of making laws and policy, but if you push hard enough, changes can be made. In the same respect, Congress members that have served long may lose respect for the electorate and end up doing their own will. In addition, these same people may over time become redundant in the laws they pass due to lack of focus. Term limits are a vital political reform that would bring new perspectives to Congress, mandate frequent legislative turnover, and diminish incentives for wasteful election-related federal spending that currently flourish in a careerist congressional culture. Sign a petition, share an article, make a call, and help move our country forward by advocating for term limits.
Is this like a big size